Nobody prepares you for what happens on the inside once the outside stops changing. You expect the money to change your life, and in some ways it does. The accounts, the numbers, the quiet architecture of things you own that nobody can see. But you don't expect it to change you. Not like this. Not in the specific and permanent way that living rich in secret actually reshapes a person from the inside out, long after the initial shock of the number wears off. It starts small. It starts with a decision you don't even remember making consciously, the decision to keep driving the same car, to keep wearing the same jacket, to keep showing up to the same version of your life that existed before any of this happened. You tell yourself it's practical. You tell yourself it's about staying grounded. And for a while, that's even true. But somewhere in the second or third year of living this way, something else starts happening underneath the practicality. Something that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with identity. You start to notice that you are two different people now, and only one of them is allowed to exist in front of anyone else. There's the version of you that sits across from your accountant once a quarter, reviewing numbers that would change how every single person in your life looks at you if they ever saw them. And there's the version of you that shows up to your sister's birthday dinner, orders the cheapest thing on the menu without thinking about it, listens to your brother-in-law complain about his mortgage rate, and nods along like the two of you are standing on the same financial ground. You are not standing on the same ground. You haven't been for years, but you nod anyway because the alternative, the version where you correct him, where you let the truth surface even slightly, changes something that can never be changed back. This is the first thing nobody tells you about living rich in secret. It's not a decision you make once. It's a decision you make constantly, in small rooms, at small tables, in small conversations that would look completely different if the people across from you knew what you knew about your own life. And making that decision over and over again, quietly, without anyone noticing you're making it, starts to wear a specific groove into how you experience your own relationships. You start listening differently, not less carefully, more carefully, because now every conversation has two layers, the one everyone else is having and the one you're having internally, translating your actual financial reality into a version small enough to fit inside the room you're sitting in. Your best friend tells you about a stressful month, about a car repair that put him behind on rent, and you feel the specific ache of knowing you could fix this in 11 seconds without noticing the money leave your account, and also knowing that fixing it would end something between you that can't be rebuilt once it's gone. So, you listen, you empathize, you may be offered to grab dinner next time, something small, something that doesn't reveal the gap. And you drive home that night carrying a version of loneliness that doesn't have a name, because it isn't the loneliness of having nothing, it's the loneliness of having enough to solve almost anyone's problem around you and choosing, deliberately, again and again, not to. People assume that kind of restraint gets easier with practice. It doesn't. It gets quieter. The discomfort stops announcing itself the way it did the first few times. But it never actually leaves. It just moves further back into the part of you that processes things alone, late at night, when nobody's watching and there's nothing left to perform for. This is where the real change happens, not in what you own, but in what you carry silently, conversation after conversation, year after year, until carrying it becomes so familiar you stop noticing the weight of it, the same way you stop noticing a watch on your wrist. You still feel it, you've just trained yourself not to react to it anymore. And there's a strange kind of pride that grows out of that training, a pride that has nothing to do with the money itself and everything to do with your ability to hold something enormous, letting it spill into a single room you walk into. But pride and loneliness live closer together than anyone expects. The same discipline that lets you sit through a friend's financial stress without flinching is the same discipline that keeps you from ever being fully known by the people who love you most. You start to realize, somewhere around year 4 or 5, that almost nobody in your life actually knows you anymore. Not because you changed who you are, but because you've been quietly editing the version of yourself you let people see, cutting out the parts that would require explanation, softening the parts that would require justification, until what's left is a carefully maintained approximation of the person you used to be before any of this started. And the strange part is, that approximation still feels like you. It still laughs at the same things, still worries about the same small things, still shows up the same way it always did. It's just missing an entire dimension that nobody gets access to anymore. An entire financial reality that exists in a locked room inside your own life, one that only your accountant, your attorney, and occasionally your own late-night thoughts are ever allowed inside. Living rich in secret doesn't just change what you can afford, it changes the architecture of your own honesty, rebuilding it around a permanent blind spot that everyone who loves you has learned to walk around without ever noticing it's there. What makes it more complicated is that the secrecy doesn't stay contained to money. It bleeds into everything else eventually. Into how you evaluate new people who enter your life, into how you interpret kindness, into how quickly your mind runs the calculation of what someone might want from you before you've even finished shaking their hand. This isn't paranoia exactly. It's something closer to a defensive instinct that develops slowly and then becomes permanent, the same way a muscle strengthens from repeated use, whether you intended to train it or not. You meet someone new at a dinner, someone genuinely warm, someone who asks good questions and remembers small details about your life the next time you see them, and some part of you, a part you didn't choose to build, quietly runs a background calculation anyway. Is this real? Is this the beginning of something? Or is this the opening move of someone who found out, or half found out, or is about to find out? Most of the time, the answer is that the person is exactly who they appear to be: warm, curious, uncomplicated. But the calculation runs anyway, every time, a low background process that never fully turns off because you've watched it happen before, watched warmth turn into a pitch the moment someone got close enough to sense what was actually underneath your ordinary life. And once you've watched that happen even once, you carry the possibility of it happening again into every new relationship for the rest of your life, whether you want to or not. This changes how you experience generosity too, both the giving and the receiving of it. When someone does something kind for you, something small, picking up a coffee, offering to help you move something heavy, you feel a specific and uncomfortable gratitude that's tangled up with the knowledge that you could have simply paid someone to do this instead, and chose the relationship over the convenience, and now owe a kind of debt that money can't actually settle. And when you do something kind for someone else, you find yourself calibrating it constantly, making sure the gesture matches the version of your life they think they know, small enough to be believable, large enough to still feel meaningful, a performance of proportional generosity that has nothing to do with what you're actually capable of giving, and everything to do with maintaining the illusion that's kept your relationships intact for years. This is exhausting in a way that never gets talked about, because from the outside it looks like nothing. It looks like an ordinary person living an ordinary life, showing up, being kind, being present. Nobody sees the constant internal math happening underneath all of it. And there's a particular kind of grief that comes with realizing that even your closest relationships, the ones you'd trust with almost anything, are being managed rather than simply lived inside of, curated rather than experienced fully, protected from a truth that you've decided again and again they can't be trusted to hold without it changing how they see you. You tell yourself this protects the relationship, and in a narrow sense, it does. The relationship continues. The dinners keep happening. The phone calls keep coming. Nothing visibly breaks. but something underneath it has already changed permanently. A layer of full honesty that used to exist between you and the people closest to you has been quietly replaced with a version of honesty that's true in every way except the one that would matter most if it were ever revealed. And you live with that, year after year, the small, persistent awareness that the people who know you best don't actually know you completely, that there's a version of you they've never met and probably never will. One that exists only in a folder your accountant updates every quarter. One that only comes out late at night when the house is quiet and there's nobody left to perform the ordinary version for. This is what living rich in secret actually costs, not the money itself. Money was never the expensive part. The expensive part is the slow, permanent restructuring of how close you're willing to let anyone get. How much of yourself you're willing to risk showing, how many relationships you quietly keep at a manageable distance because the alternative, the fully known version of your life, feels too dangerous to ever fully hand over to another person. Some people who inherit this kind of wealth learn to live inside the trade-off comfortably. Most don't, not completely. Most carry it the way you carry anything you've decided is necessary but can never fully make peace with, functionally, competently, and with a small persistent ache that never entirely goes away. The ache of being surrounded by people who love you and still, somehow, being profoundly alone in the one part of your life that shaped everything else about who you became. The money changes almost nothing about what you can buy that actually matters. What it changes permanently and completely is how much of yourself you ever let anyone else hold. If any part of this felt closer to home than you expected, you're probably not as alone in it as it feels. This channel exists for exactly that, the quiet parts of money nobody else is willing to talk about. Subscribe if you want more of this. And if you've lived any version of this story yourself, leave it in the comments. Sometimes the only place that version of you gets to exist honestly is right here.